in a world shattered by war and chaos. A fragile little angel, her black wings broken and torn, swore she would grow strong enough to put an end to inequality and injustice. Time passed, and that angel became the dreaded conqueror, Lufa's Mafal. A band of adventurers gathered to strike her down. Yet she revealed a power beyond comprehension, an unstoppable ability that could overwhelm even heroes of the highest rank. No matter how fierce their attacks, Lufa's always answered with something greater. Even so, she could not escape the clash unscathed. Their strength was simply too overwhelming. Still, throughout the entire battle, she gave the impression that everything was under her control. Then the unthinkable happened. One of the enemy warriors deliberately allowed himself to be wounded, unleashing a climax ability that caught Lufa's off guard. It opened just enough of an opening for the party's mage to cast a subspace seal, trapping the villainess at last. Though imprisoned, she laughed wickedly and taunted her captors, saying that if they had the skill to take her down, perhaps they might even stand a chance against Orm, the Demon King. Back in front of his computer, a boy scratched his head in defeat. He had lost the fight in Xgate Online, and Lufa's had fallen, but at least he could say she fought until the very end. Suddenly, on his screen, appeared Alovenus, the goddess of creation, the very deity who had shaped the world of Xgate. She asked if he would like to take on a new role within that world. To him, it felt monumental, a personal message from the developers. After all, his character, Lufa's Mafahel, had become as iconic as the Demon King himself. Naturally, the boy accepted. In an instant, he was pulled into Xgate Online, not as an avatar this time, but in flesh and blood. A group of warriors and adventurers, following their king, had just broken the seal of the black-winged conqueror, and they stared in awe at the figure that appeared before them. Touching his new body, the player froze as he realized the truth beneath his clothing was a rather generous chest. Somehow, he had been reborn as his own character. When he first created Lufa's, his reasoning had been simple. If I'm going to stare at this character for hours, she'd better be beautiful. That was his very first mission in the game. What he never expected was to become her himself, the terrifying yet stunning black-winged conqueror. Desperate for answers, the boy tried to ask a question, but the words that came out weren't questions, they were commands, fierce and absolute, carrying such force that the poor adventurers collapsed to the ground as though crushed by gravity itself. They could only obey. Realizing that his racial ability intimidation must have activated, Lufa's forced herself to rein it back. The moment she did, an elf among the group grew pale. He was convinced the conqueror had returned. Lufa's, her voice sharp and merciless, demanded the elf explain how he knew her. Terrified, he fainted on the spot, leaving the others to fill in the blanks. From their account, she learned the truth. She had been sealed for 200 years, and the Demon King still ruled Midgars. The adventurers had tried to use Xgate to summon a hero who could defeat him, but instead, they had revived Lufa's Mafahel. It finally dawned on the boy inside her. He was truly inside the game, and the Xgate spell, a central mechanic that had never once appeared, had been used at last. Amazing as it was, this wasn't the time to geek out. What mattered was figuring out what to do next. Seeing the fear in everyone's eyes, Lufa's decided the best course was to leave. She told them to forget she existed and to summon another hero in her place to face the Demon King. Revenge for her sealing was not her goal. That last battle had been enough for her. No, this would no longer be the story of Lufa's the Conqueror, but of a young woman whose hopes had been broken, one now searching for a new path. She would see what the world had become and what form it had taken. With that, Lufa's spread her wings and took to the skies, surprised to find she could still use them so freely. Soaring into the open air, the boy, now the conqueror herself, felt a rush of pure joy. He had been pulled into his favorite game, Xgate Online, inhabiting a character of his own creation, one so powerful it thrilled him to the core. One day, he would have to figure out how to return to his original world, but that could wait. Soon after, he stumbled upon a towering landmark he hadn't seen in ages, an iconic structure at the very heart of the game's lore. Xgate Online, set in the world of Midgars, was a medieval fantasy MMO whose crown jewel was its PvP system. Players swore allegiance to a nation, waged war against rival kingdoms, and fought to claim victory for their side. But there was another feature that made the game unique: the narrative system, which adapted players' choices and actions into an official storyline. Lufa's Mafahel was one of its greatest examples. She had climbed to the level cap and become the strongest character in existence. For the first time in the game's history, her creator had managed to unify all of Midgars under her rule. It was such a monumental feat that she was officially recognized in the lore, dubbed the Black-Winged Conqueror. and even granted semi-official status by the developers. But a world with only one supreme ruler was no fun. So the boys struck deals with other players, dividing them into two great armies, the Conqueror's Army, under Lufa's, and the Army of Light, under the Heroes. They ignored the official final boss entirely and staged the largest battle in the game's history. And, as everyone knows by now, that was when Lufa's was finally defeated, sealed away in subspace for centuries. Now, standing before the sky tower of Mafahel, her fortress Lufa's makes her way to the throne room. A wave of inexplicable nostalgia washes over her as she takes in the great hall. Though dusty and empty, it's still in good enough condition to be used. She sits upon the throne and remembers the friends she once had, the companions she gathered in this very tower to drink, laugh, and set out on missions to expand her domain. Then, a memory suddenly surfaces, catching the player by surprise. At that very moment, a young girl appears, stunned to find Lufa's seated on the throne. With a radiant smile and a burst of excitement, she approaches her leader, the woman she has patiently awaited for 200 long years. But Lufa's doesn't share her enthusiasm. In truth, she doesn't even remember who this girl is. Frustrated but undeterred, the girl introduces herself as Dena, the Conqueror's faithful advisor. Only then does the player recall placing an NPC in this tower when it was first created. Apparently, the generic backstory given to her had been enough for Dena to develop a will of her own. That, at least, explains why she had been waiting for so long. After all, Dena is no human player. To avoid making the situation more awkward, Lufa's apologizes for forgetting such a loyal servant and thanks Dena for safeguarding the tower in her absence. After Lufa's recounts the story of how she arrived there, Dena speculates that the ones responsible for freeing her master must have been from the western nation of Levitane, since they had been preparing a hero summoning ritual for quite some time. Curious, Lufa's asks what has happened since her departure. Dena explains that the despised heroes who once defeated her became known as the Seven Heroes, each founding their own nation. 2 centuries have passed, 4 of them are now dead, leaving only 3 races with longer lifespans. The Demon King still lives, as do the 12 celestial stars of conquest, the rare and powerful NPC beasts Lufa's herself had designed to serve her in war. Back then, she believed a ruler should always be surrounded by formidable subordinates, like 4 generals or something of the sort, so she created them. Dena knows the whereabouts of 6 of these creatures, and reveals that 2 have joined the Demon King to avenge Lufa's death. Though they fight in her name, their master disapproves of the path they've taken and vows to deliver them a harsh reprimand. In any case, the Conqueror's creator intends to see the world's current state with her own eyes, and confirm whether the 3 surviving heroes are players like him. For that, she must set out on a journey to reunite the 12 stars. Dena informs her that the nearest one, the Ram Ares, is in Svel, home to one of the 3 remaining heroes, Megrez. Ares is camped at the foot of the nearby volcano, still trying to break into Svel after all these years. Without hesitation, Lufa's decides they should head there at once, but Dena warns her not to rush out carelessly. Her master is too well known, she would be instantly recognized. Lufa's insists that after all this time, no one would remember her face. Yet Dena reminds her that long-lived races, such as elves, certainly do, and those black wings are far too distinctive to ignore. On top of that, the Conqueror's army is completely broke. If they truly plan to embark on this journey, they'll need money. So Dena suggests they go undercover in Svel, register with the Adventurers Guild, and take on small jobs at first to avoid drawing attention. And so, the pair sets out for Svel. Lufa's dons a cloak that conceals her entire body, wings tucked tightly beneath her garments. Still, as she notices the lingering stares of the townsfolk, she realizes she might be attracting a different kind of attention. Regardless, the 2 head for the guild, a tavern as well as a gathering place for adventurers. The moment she steps inside, Lufa's feels a rush of familiarity. Surrounded by shady, rough-looking types, she's struck by a strange sense of comfort. A nostalgic reminder of her days as an adventurer before founding her own nation. Standing before the quest board, Dena suggests they start small with a job paying 1/200 to find a dozen lost cats. But Lufa's points out that tracking animals by scent is a beast man's skill, making it far too difficult. So Dena finds another request: exterminating orcs, also known as porks. When slain, they have a 3% chance of dropping an item that increases maximum HP, a perfect chance to earn not only the 1,500 reward, but potentially rare loot as well. Without wasting time, the two travel to Isle Village. There, the elder pours out his worries the porks have been destroying homes, kidnapping women, and killing the village's young men. Dena reassures the people that the solution to all their problems is standing right before them. And that solution is none other than Lufa's Mafahal. After locating the pork nest, Dena shudders and remarks that even the goddess of creation must regret every day having made such a vile race. Lufa's responds that the goddess is merciful and loves all equally, but Dena insists that Alovinus is not quite so benevolent. Either way, she's eager to see her master wipe out these orcs once and for all. Lufa steps forward, spreading her vast black wings as she prepares for battle. First, she checks her status to confirm she truly is at the maximum level, and that everything is in perfect order to devastate these swine-like creatures. Of course, there's a difference between crushing enemies with a controller in hand and doing it in real life. The player feels a flicker of unease, but since they're already here, better to try than to back down. With that in mind, Lufa snaps her fingers to awaken alchemic creation. At once, dozens of magical swords rise from the earth and launch toward the enemy monsters, tearing through the guards at the entrance with sinister ease and brutal violence. Though she's the one slaughtering these creatures, the player feels absolutely nothing as the massacre unfolds. In the next instant, every orc rushes out from within the cave to face the intruder. There's an overwhelming number of warriors, and at the center of it all, their massive leader looms, promising to be a far greater threat. Dena's jaw drops in fear, while Lufa's remains perfectly composed. The moment the monsters charge at her, the conqueror realizes just how absurdly slow they really are. Every movement looks like the crawl of crippled slugs compared to her speed. With almost laughable ease, Mafahal rips the heads off the lesser orcs as if it were nothing more than a child's game. As blood rains down, the larger orcs' eyes quiver with dread, and the black-winged conqueror can't help but reflect on how fragile these creatures truly are. In a desperate frenzy, the orc chief hurls himself forward with all his weight, unleashing blow after blow. The ground shakes beneath his fury, the terrain collapsing into chaos. And yet, despite this storm of rage, Lufa's remains utterly untouched, pristine, unscathed. As flames rise, wrapping the monster in a fiery prison, the winged celestial reflects that the real difference isn't their fragility at all. It's that her strength and speed are so far beyond theirs. The orcs might as well be nothing. With that thought, Lufa gently presses her closed fist against the enemy leader's forehead. His skull bursts apart in an instant. Dena stares at the grotesque sight, her face frozen between terror and awe, while her master, having crushed the fight so easily, concludes that this could never be called a battle. No, it was a massacre. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.